We imagine justice as a blindfolded figure holding a set of scales. But sometimes that blindfold slips, and the judge decides what's really needed isn't a balanced sentence, but a dose of weaponized irony. We're about to enter a world where courtrooms become theaters of humiliation, and the punishments are so bizarre, they sound completely made up. These are 50 real sentences that prove the law has a terrifyingly creative sense of humor. 1. In Ohio, a woman who drove on the sidewalk to get around a school bus was sentenced to become a human traffic cone of shame. For 2 consecutive mornings, she had to stand at an intersection holding a sign that read, "Only an idiot would drive on the sidewalk to avoid a school bus." The judge didn't just want her to feel remorse. He wanted her to be publicly branded as a certified, high-grade, public idiot. This wasn't just a sentence, it was performance art, a masterpiece of humiliation sponsored by the local judicial system. 2. A woman was convicted of abandoning her dog in a house so filthy that rescuers in hazmat suits called it the most disgusting place they'd ever seen. Judge Michael Culinary decided that she needed to understand what she put that animal through. So he sentenced her to spend a day at the local dump. Not working, just sitting. For 8 hours she had to sit alone amidst the filth and stench, to think about her actions. The judge said it best. "I want you to feel the same loneliness, isolation, and filth that your dog felt." 3. This one feels less like a punishment and more like a bizarre episode of a sitcom. After a husband and wife, Joseph and Melinda Bray, got into a heated argument that ended with a minor charge, the judge decided to play marriage counselor. Instead of a fine or community service, he sentenced the husband to take his wife on a proper date. The judge specified the itinerary: buy her flowers, get her dressed up, take her bowling, and then treat her to a nice dinner at Red Lobster. He wasn't just prescribing a date, he was practically storyboarding their reconciliation, complete with Cheddar Bay biscuits. 4. An Ohio judge became a vigilante barber after a woman was charged with a crime related to her daughter's botched haircut. The judge, apparently believing in an eye for an eye and a bad hairdo for a bad hairdo, offered the woman a reduced sentence. The catch? He would personally chop off her ponytail right there in the courtroom. She agreed, and with a few snips from a pair of office scissors, justice was served. It's a bold move when a judge decides the law isn't enough and that he must also take up shears to balance the scales of style. 5. When slumlord Nicholas Dionysiopoulos was found guilty of countless housing code violations, the judge handed down a sentence of pure, unadulterated poetic justice. He sentenced Dionysiopoulos to 6 months of house arrest. But not in his own comfortable home. He had to live in one of his own filthy, rat-infested apartments with no heat and broken plumbing until every single violation in the building was fixed. This wasn't just a punishment. It was a mandatory empathy boot camp, forcing a man to literally live in the misery he had created for others. 6. 2 teenagers in Colorado committed a crime that plagues suburban parks everywhere, blasting aggressively loud rap music, complete with lyrics that would make a sailor blush, right next to a playground. The judge, Paul Sacco, decided that what these young men needed wasn't a fine, but a forced dose of high culture. He offered to reduce their $150 fine to just $30 on one condition. They had to attend a classical music concert featuring Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. This wasn't just a punishment. It was an attempt at a musical intervention. He was essentially trying to reboot their entire musical operating system from hardcore rap to Baroque concertos. 7. After a woman in Ohio abandoned 35 kittens in 2 local parks, a judge decided the punishment should fit the crime, but with a modern, public-shaming twist. Instead of jail time, she was sentenced to spend a night alone in the woods, without food, water, or a tent. Additionally, she had to pay for a full-page newspaper ad that featured her mugshot alongside pictures of the adorable kittens she abandoned, complete with a personal apology. 8. When 2 Florida teenagers were caught covering a school bus in graffiti, they probably expected a few dozen hours of community service. What they got was a lesson in meticulous, mind-numbing labor. The judge sentenced them to clean the entire bus, inside and out. The catch? Their only cleaning tools were toothbrushes. Every inch of that bus, from the floor to the ceiling, the windows to the wheels, had to be scrubbed with a tool designed for cleaning teeth. The judge didn't just want the bus to be clean. He wanted the kids to feel the sheer, agonizing absurdity of their vandalism. 9. After a man in Oklahoma City wouldn't stop sending nasty messages to his ex-girlfriend, the judge sentenced him to a masterclass in forced chivalry. First, he had to buy her flowers and take her to dinner. But the real work was the writing assignment. He had to write, "I will not call my ex-girlfriend a bad name," 100 times. The detail that makes this brilliant? He had to do it all with a calligraphy pen. The judge turned a petty crime into a mandatory, tedious art project, forcing him to slowly and gracefully craft a beautiful monument to his own stupidity. 10. A man was arrested after trying to pay for his dinner at a restaurant with a comically terrible, hand-drawn $1 million bill. The judge, recognizing the sheer harmless absurdity of the crime, sentenced the man to 100 hours of community service. The assignment? He had to attend a local beginner's art class to improve his counterfeiting skills. It's a sentence that doesn't just punish, it winks, acknowledging that sometimes crime is just really, really stupid. 11. In Spain, a local politician was caught in a series of blatant lies to his constituents. The judge decided that the punishment should be both educational and deeply humiliating. Instead of a fine, he sentenced the politician to read the entire story of Pinocchio out loud to a group of elementary school children. Imagine having to stand in front of innocent kids, reading a cautionary tale about the consequences of lying, knowing every single person in the room understands you are the real-life Pinocchio. That's not a sentence, that's a soul-crushing morality play where you're the star dummy. 12. In the modern world, what's the one punishment that could truly cripple a person's social and professional life? A judge in Montana found it. After a woman was convicted of a campaign of relentless online harassment, sending thousands of abusive messages, the court delivered a sentence that was both perfectly fitting and utterly devastating. She was banned from owning or using any device with internet access for 3 years. No smartphone, no laptop, no social media. In today's world, that's not just a punishment. It's a sentence to live in a different century. 13. In Alabama, a man was convicted of stealing a prime rib roast from a grocery store. The judge, in a moment of what can only be described as gastronomic justice, decided to attack the very source of the man's desire. The sentence wasn't jail time or a fine. It was a court-ordered dietary change. The man was legally banned from eating any meat or poultry for 1 full year. He was sentenced to mandatory vegetarianism. This opens up a universe of insane logistical questions. How do you enforce this? Does he have a parole officer who conducts surprise bacon checks? The judge didn't just punish his crime, he turned the man's own appetite into a culinary prison. 14. A man in Utah was arrested for disorderly conduct after launching a string of profane insults at police officers. The judge sentenced him to community service with a twist of forced hospitality. For an entire month, the man was required to stand outside the police station during the morning shift change and offer every single officer a free cup of coffee and a donut, accompanied by a polite, "Have a nice day." From public menace to public barista, he was forced to serve the very people he had verbally abused, one awkward, sugary transaction at a time. 15. When 2 teenagers decided to vandalize a car by spray painting vulgar words on it, they ended up in front of Judge Michael Cicconetti, a recurring character in the world of bizarre punishments. He gave them a choice: jail, or they had to shave each other's heads and beards right there in the courtroom. They chose the haircuts. One of the teens burst into tears as his precious beard was shaved off. The judge's logic was simple. You want to deface someone else's property? Fine. Let's start by defacing your own public image. 16. In Houston, a man with a history of drunk driving was caught again. The judge knew that fines and jail time weren't working, so he added a new condition to his sentence. The man was forced to carry a picture of the people he had killed in a previous drunk driving accident in his wallet at all times. He was ordered to look at it every single day. This punishment transcends simple correction and enters the realm of psychological torment, a constant, unavoidable reminder of the irreversible damage he caused. 17. A man in Ohio was caught calling a police officer a pig. Judge Culinary, never one to miss an opportunity, delivered one of the most literal punishments ever recorded. He sentenced the man to stand on a busy street corner for 2 hours next to a 350-pound pig. To ensure no one missed the point, the man also had to hold a sign that read, "This is not a police officer." The judge didn't just make a point. He orchestrated a live-action, farm animal-based comedy sketch to defend the honor of his local police force. 18. How do you punish a CEO for corporate greed? A judge in Texas found a way to hit him where it truly hurts: his ego. After a CEO was convicted of defrauding his own employees, he was sentenced to become the main attraction at the next company picnic. Specifically, he had to sit in the dunk tank for 8 hours straight. For one day, every employee he had wronged got to take their best shot, transforming a symbol of corporate power into a dripping, humiliated spectacle. This is justice that's not just served, but thrown at 50 miles per hour. 19. A man in Ohio had a bad habit of parking his large truck on the sidewalk, forcing people, including those in wheelchairs, into the busy street. The case landed on the desk of our favorite judicial artist, Judge Michael Culinary. He decided the man needed a literal change in perspective. The sentence? The offender had to spend a day navigating the town in a wheelchair to experience firsthand the frustration he caused. This wasn't just a punishment. It was a mandatory lesson in empathy. The judge didn't just fine him. He fundamentally altered his physical relationship with the world for a day, forcing him to see the city not from his high and mighty truck, but from the exact vantage point of his victims. 20. An Oklahoma judge was tired of seeing the same young people in his courtroom for petty crimes. His solution was brilliantly morbid. He started sentencing nonviolent first-time offenders to visit the local morgue. They were required to observe autopsies and view the bodies of people who had died from drug overdoses or violent altercations. His goal was to shock them into realizing where their path could lead. It's a brutal, in-your-face strategy that uses the dead to scare the living straight. 21. A man named Andrew was caught driving his flashy sports car at over 100 miles per hour in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. The judge looked at Andrew, looked at his record, and realized that a simple fine would be nothing more than a minor inconvenience. He needed to punish not the act, but the arrogance behind it. The sentence was a masterpiece of lifestyle demolition. The judge suspended Andrew's license and ordered him to sell his prized sports car. He then had to use that money to buy a yearly bus pass and provide the receipt to the court. For 1 year, the speed demon was sentenced to the slow, humbling, and often confusing world of public transportation. The judge didn't just take away his license. He took away his status symbol and forced him to rejoin the very society he was recklessly endangering. 22. When two grown men in Oklahoma had a fistfight over a parking spot, the judge saw them for what they were: toddlers. His sentence was straight out of a preschool playbook, a 1-hour timeout. But this wasn't in a quiet corner. They were ordered to a busy public square, in the middle of the day, to hold hands for the entire hour. It's a brilliant move. You simply can't look tough while trapped in the world's most awkward court-ordered buddy moment. The judge didn't just punish their aggression. He annihilated their egos with deeply uncomfortable, forced intimacy. 23. A man in Texas was convicted of insurance fraud after faking a debilitating slip-and-fall accident to get a massive payout. The judge sentenced him to a unique form of role-playing. He had to spend 1 full day from sunup to sundown with a person who was genuinely paralyzed from the waist down due to a real accident. He had to assist them with their daily tasks, seeing up close the struggles, the pain, and the resilience that his fake injury had mocked. It was a sentence designed to replace his greed with a powerful and hopefully permanent dose of perspective. 24. There's a special place in hell for people who steal from the Salvation Army's red kettles at Christmas. For one man, that place was a cold forest in Ohio. After being convicted of the theft, Judge Culinary sentenced him to spend 24 hours completely alone in the woods on Christmas Eve. He was given only minimal supplies. The judge's goal was to make him feel the cold, desperation, and isolation that the homeless people he stole from experience every single day. This wasn't a fine. It was a 24-hour crash course in empathy delivered by Mother Nature herself. 25. In Spain, a small-town mayor thought he could play fast and loose with building permits, illegally approving the construction of a vacation home in a protected coastal area. When he was finally convicted, the judge delivered a sentence of pure, unadulterated poetic justice. The mayor was sentenced to a unique form of community service. He had to personally demolish the illegal structure himself, with a sledgehammer. This wasn't just manual labor. It was a beautifully ironic act of justice. The same hands that signed the illegal permit were now forced to swing the hammer that would bring it all down, erasing his own corrupt legacy, brick by painful brick. 26. Lying about military service, a practice known as stolen valor, is a crime that strikes at the heart of honor. An Arizona judge decided the punishment for one such offender should be appropriately monumental. The man was sentenced to handwrite, in alphabetical order, the names of all 6,756 soldiers from his state who had died in combat since the beginning of the Vietnam War. Then, he had to read every single name out loud in a recorded session. This is a punishment designed to be a soul-crushing marathon of shame, forcing him to confront the real weight of the honor he tried to steal. 27. A professional scam artist in New York was convicted of swindling dozens of elderly people out of their life savings. The judge knew that simply putting him in prison wasn't enough. He wanted to dismantle the man's ego. So, as part of his sentence, the man was ordered to hold a series of public seminars. The topic? How to spot and avoid scams. He was forced to use his own crooked expertise for good, standing in front of an audience of senior citizens and teaching them exactly how to protect themselves from people just like him. It's a punishment that turns the predator into a protector. 28. When two teenagers in New Mexico were caught shoplifting from a local store, the judge decided to go medieval on them. Their punishment was to walk 20 miles through the center of town leading a donkey, which carried a sign detailing their crime. The judge's goal was to bring back old-fashioned public humiliation. It's a strange world where you can commit a crime with a smartphone in your pocket and be punished like a disgraced peasant from the 14th century. The donkey, whose name was Gidget, was reportedly the only one who enjoyed the day. 29. After a man was convicted of stealing a rare historical book from a local museum, the judge decided to employ a punishment straight out of the 18th century. He sentenced the man to become the official town crier for a day. Dressed in full colonial garb, complete with a tri-cornered hat and a bell, he had to walk through the town square, ringing his bell and shouting, hear ye, I am a thief. I stole from our history, and I am very sorry." The judge didn't just punish him, he turned him into a living, breathing historical reenactment of his own stupidity. 30. A manufacturing company was found guilty of illegally dumping toxic waste into a local river, killing thousands of fish. The CEO and two top executives, who claimed they were unaware, received a sentence of mandatory camping. For 1 full week, they were required to pitch tents and live on the banks of the very river they had poisoned, drinking filtered water from the source and living in the environmental mess they created. It was a court-ordered field trip into the heart of their own corporate negligence. 31. An Ohio man was arrested after pepper spraying a pizza delivery driver in the face and stealing his pizza. The judge, in a moment of inspired culinary justice, handed down a sentence that was both simple and diabolical. The man was ordered to buy a large pizza for the driver and then sit and watch him eat the entire thing. This wasn't about restitution. It was a pure power move. He was forced to witness the simple, delicious joy he had tried to violently steal, turning a hot meal into a cold dish of shame. 32. For weeks, A man terrorized his apartment complex by hosting incredibly loud, late-night parties. When he finally landed in court, the judge decided the punishment shouldn't just be a fine, but a total inversion of his lifestyle. He was sentenced to 40 hours of community service, with one specific, soul-crushing assignment. He had to work the front desk at the local public library. For an entire week, the loudmouth partier was forced to become a guardian of the very peace he had shattered, spending his days whispering shh to students and senior citizens in a sanctuary of silence. 33. A notorious deer poacher in Missouri was finally caught. The judge knew that jail time would do little to change the man's mindset. Instead, he handed down a truly transformative sentence. The poacher was ordered to watch the movie Bambi once a month for the entire duration of his year-long sentence. This is psychological warfare of the highest order. The judge weaponized Disney, forcing a hardened outdoorsman to sit through the traumatic animated death of a deer's mother again and again until the message finally broke through his calloused exterior. It's a sentence that aimed not for the man's freedom but for his heart. 34. After a teenager was convicted of sending hundreds of threatening text messages, the judge decided on a punishment that was a perfect blend of modern and ancient torture. For 6 months, the teen was allowed to keep his phone, but with a major downgrade. He was legally forbidden from using a smartphone. Instead, he was given a 20-year-old flip phone. He had to learn the agonizingly slow art of T9 texting, one multi-tap button press at a time. The judge didn't take away his ability to communicate. He just made it so incredibly annoying that he'd never want to send a mass of angry texts again. 35. In Missouri, 2 teenagers decided it would be a brilliant idea to deface a statue of a local historical figure. The judge, however, believed that ignorance was the real crime. So he prescribed a punishment that was part history lesson, part public humiliation. First, they had to research and write a 20-page paper on the life of the person whose statue they vandalized. But that was just the beginning. The grand finale was a public presentation. They were required to dress in historical costumes and deliver a lecture on the figure's importance, right in front of the very statue they had defaced. This is next-level judicial work. The judge didn't just punish them. He forced them to become the official tour guides for their own crime scene. 36. A man in Oregon who fancied himself a maverick decided he was simply above paying taxes. After being convicted of tax evasion, the judge recognized this wasn't just a financial crime, it was an ideological one. The punishment, therefore, had to be ideological as well. The man was sentenced to 200 hours of community service, not picking up trash, but working inside the very system he despised. He was assigned to the county clerk's office with a single, mind-numbing task: manually sorting and filing thousands of property tax documents. The judge didn't just sentence him to labor. He sentenced him to be a tiny, insignificant cog in the giant, inescapable machine of bureaucracy he thought he could outsmart. 37. When a man in Kentucky was arrested for being drunk and disorderly in public, the judge decided the apology should be as absurd as the crime. He was ordered to make a formal public apology. The audience? A police horse named PJ. The man had to stand in front of the horse's stable and deliver a sincere, heartfelt speech expressing his remorse for his behavior, all while the horse likely just stared back, completely unimpressed. The judge's reasoning remains a glorious mystery, but he effectively turned a legal proceeding into a piece of surrealist performance art. 38. In Pennsylvania, a business owner was found guilty of writing a bad check for over $2,000 to one of his vendors. The judge, clearly a fan of physical comedy and brutal inconvenience, ordered him to pay the fine in full. The catch was the currency. He had to pay the entire amount in pennies. That's over 200,000 pennies, weighing more than half a ton. The punishment wasn't in the amount, but in the sheer, back-breaking logistical nightmare of acquiring and transporting the physical weight of his own financial irresponsibility. 39. 2 teenagers in South Carolina thought it would be fun to start a small brush fire. That fire quickly raged out of control, causing significant damage. The judge decided they needed a lesson in consequences that they would never forget. He sentenced them to spend a weekend at a local hospital. They weren't there to work, they were there to visit the burn unit. They were required to see the devastating injuries and witness the agonizing recovery process of real burn victims. It's a brutal, sobering punishment that uses the harsh reality of human suffering as a terrifying and unforgettable deterrent. 40. Sometimes justice needs a little bit of surrealist flair. After 2 women in Utah were caught stealing a gift basket from a charity auction, the judge cooked up a sentence that sounds like a fever dream. They were ordered to participate in a walk of shame to raise money for the very charity they stole from. This wasn't just any walk. They had to lead a llama, borrowed from a local farm, on a 10-mile trek through the city. Why a llama? There is no logical reason, and that's what makes it so brilliant. The sheer, unforgettable weirdness of the spectacle guaranteed everyone would know about their crime. 41. When a group of young men were caught playing football in a river, they probably expected a small fine for trespassing. What they got was a judge who decided they needed a lesson in public health. He sentenced them all to go to the local health department and get tested for every single waterborne disease imaginable. The judge essentially weaponized their own fear of getting sick as a deterrent, turning a fun afternoon into a week of anxious waiting for lab results. 42. A man was repeatedly ticketed for roaring through his quiet suburban neighborhood on an obnoxiously loud motorcycle. The judge, recognizing that the noise was a core part of the man's identity, delivered a punishment of pure emasculation. He was forbidden from riding his motorcycle for 6 months. Instead, his only legally permitted mode of 2-wheeled transport was a 49cc moped. The judge didn't just silence the noise, he sentenced the biker to the unmistakable, high-pitched whine of utter defeat. 43. In a moment of sheer audacity, a defendant in an Illinois courtroom stood up and cursed directly at the judge. The judge, remaining unnervingly calm, simply called a recess. When he returned, he handed the man a piece of paper and a sentence. The man was to stand in the courthouse lobby for 4 hours and read a prepared, 1,000-word speech on the importance of respecting the judicial system to every single person who walked by. It was a punishment that turned his own voice, the instrument of his crime, into a tool for his own re-education. 44. A woman in California was caught stealing hundreds of dollars from a local Girl Scout troop's cookie fundraising money. This is a crime so universally despicable, it required a punishment of mythic proportions. The judge sentenced her to spend an entire weekend standing outside a supermarket dressed in a giant, ridiculous chocolate chip cookie costume. On her chest was a sign detailing her crime and apologizing to the Girl Scouts. She was forced to become a walking, life-sized monument to her own shameful greed. 45. After a man was convicted of severely neglecting his dog, leaving it alone for days without food, a judge decided the man needed to understand the scale of the problem he contributed to. He was sentenced to 80 hours of community service at the local animal shelter. His specific job? Cleaning the cages and kennels of all the abandoned and unwanted animals. Day after day, he was forced to confront the sad, hopeful eyes of hundreds of animals, a constant, unavoidable reminder of the one he so carelessly betrayed. 46. We've seen judges punish noise polluters by forcing them to listen to awful music. But one judge in Connecticut took the opposite, and perhaps more terrifying, approach. A man was repeatedly cited for blasting his car stereo at deafening volumes in his quiet neighborhood. The judge sentenced him to 48 hours of solitary confinement. But it wasn't a jail cell. It was a silent room. No television, no radio, no phone, no books. Just him, a chair, and 2 days of absolute unbroken silence. For a man addicted to noise, this was the ultimate sensory deprivation, forcing him to finally listen to nothing but himself. 47. We've all seen it. Someone without a disability permit parks in a handicapped spot out of pure convenience. A judge in Florida got so fed up, he devised a punishment that was both a hassle and an education. Offenders were given a choice, a $500 fine, or they could serve as parking lot monitors for a day. Their job was to spend 8 hours at a busy mall, documenting and photographing every single instance of someone misusing a handicapped spot. He forced them to see the world not as rule breakers but as rule enforcers, making them allies in the fight against their own former laziness. 48. In Ohio, a woman decided to take a 30-mile taxi ride and then simply not pay for it. The judge, a man who clearly believes in the principle of an eye for an eye, saw a very simple solution. He gave her a choice: spend 60 days in jail or walk the entire 30-mile distance herself. She chose to walk. This wasn't just a punishment, it was a mandatory real-world math problem. The judge forced her to physically experience the value of the service she stole, one miserable step at a time. It's the kind of sentence that doesn't just punish you, it gives you blisters and a deep, personal understanding of what a mile actually feels like. 49. This punishment is a masterclass in psychological warfare. A woman in Cleveland was so outrageously rude to a bus driver that she ended up in court. The judge sentenced her to wear a sign that said, "I was rude to my bus driver." Simple enough. But the real punishment was the location. She had to stand at a bus stop, wearing the sign, and hand out free bus passes to people for 2 full days. She was forced to become a beacon of generosity at the exact scene of her crime, transforming her from a public nuisance into a public servant against her will. All right, we've covered 49 insane punishments. But before we get to our final one, it's time for the final verdict. In our opinion, the award for the most brilliantly unhinged punishment goes to Number 15, the judge who turned his courtroom into a barbershop of shame. Forcing 2 vandals to shave each other's heads is one thing, but the fact that one of them cried about losing his beard elevates this from a simple punishment to a masterpiece of humiliation. It's swift, it's personal, and it's hilarious. Do you agree? Or did another punishment deserve the top spot? Let us know in the comments. And now, our final number. 50. A group of teenagers in New York were convicted of vandalizing a historic church, causing thousands of dollars in damage. The judge decided that the punishment should be quiet, consistent, and profound. He sentenced them to attend church services every single Sunday for 1 full year. This wasn't about forced religion. It was about forced community. Week after week, they had to sit there and face the congregation, the elderly people, the families, the children, whose shared history they had to face. They had to see their victims not as a faceless building, but as a community of real people. It's a punishment that aimed for slow, silent, and maybe even genuine redemption. So, from weaponized Disney movies to mandatory handholding, these punishments are definitely unforgettable. But what do you really think about them? Is this a brilliant way to make the punishment fit the crime, or is it just a wild abuse of power? We really want to know your take on this. Drop your honest opinion in the comments below. And if you believe the world's absurdities demand a closer look, subscribe and hit the like button.